All right, welcome back to Detection at Scale. Today, I'm here with Michael Sinno, who's the Director of Detection and Response at Google. Michael, I've been really excited to have this conversation for some time. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm doing well. Why don't you give us a quick intro on yourself, how you ended up at Google, and kind of what you're working on right now?
Sure. I'm Mike Sinno. I'm the Director of Detection and Response at Google. I've been here, it'll be 20 years in April. And I started at Google as a Windows sysadmin in 2006. And prior to that, I was a rapid response engineer at Microsoft, focusing on just general, kind of sysadmin type stuff, going in on site and fixing lots of problems. And then my kind of security journey started during Aurora. As you know, there was a YouTube documentary on it, but my journey started there, and it's been a wild ride ever since.
20 years is a long time, and I can expect that the last few years have been pretty jarring, probably from like an innovation and change perspective, right?
They have been, but I honestly feel like it's always been like that at Google. We've pushed so far, so fast over the course of the last 20 years, and when I started, it was 10,000 people. Right, we're at 200,000 people now.
Wow.
So it's the only constant is change, and I know that that's somewhat of a cliche, but at Google, it's a very common thing. I mean, definitely, post 2022, 2021, things have definitely sped up, but I feel like that's, at Google, that's not an uncommon thing that something new comes out and we're all over it or we're inventing it.
Yeah, well, obviously the transformer came from Google, which obviously led into all the breakthroughs that OpenAI had in their models, and now obviously you all have certainly caught up with Gemini, and Gemini is a really fascinating and impactful model, probably for security in a lot of ways as well. And I'm really curious to pick your brain on Sec-Gemini and sort of what the vision is there. So yeah, why don't we just kind of start with the evolution? So with large language models coming into play, like how have you all been navigating that shift? And I can imagine it's probably been going on for some time now, right?
Yeah, I mean, we got in on it early. I mean, we were using AI. Well, I started on the detection response team in 2018, and we were already pushing. We already had a humans trained machine roadmap for how should we do this. Now it's really pre-LLM, pre-transformer, but we had the facade model that we were using to evaluate exfiltration. Right, that was quite good, but it was also early. And then once things really started speeding up, our first question was how can we use it, right? And we started basic, right? Can we write incident summaries with it? Because a lot of our analysts, when we have a big incident, an exec notification goes out to our executives, and people will spend quite a long time actually trying to craft that because they want every word to be perfect. And it's actually much harder for non-native English speakers in some cases. So the first thing we did was like, can we just summarize everything and send a complete update? So took everything from, say 30 minutes to write that to about a minute and a half and then some checking. So that's really where it started. In a lot of the response world, because it was a little more, I would say a little looser in terms of how we could use it. Right. When I look at the detection world, it's much more, are the trains running on time? So we've been extremely careful in how we're using it, even though we're pushing the boundaries. Like right now, one of the bigger things we're doing is deduping our tickets. So automation has always been core to the team for the last 15 years. So we handle about 1 million tickets a year, of which, less than 1% are handled by humans. So we've already had a lot of fundamentals of detection as code and a number of other things that to keep the noise down for the analysts. But now, with the advent of using AI in this manner, it helps us really take the routine and just automate it away using AI. But in many cases, we have to do a critical evaluation too, or should we use AI, or do we just need a script and some SQL, right? In many cases, a lot of products I see are, things that don't necessarily need to be AI, but they're trying to catch up. People are trying to catch up on automation because they honestly, we have an embarrassment of riches too at Google because of our infrastructure and what we have. So yeah, I mean, that's where it started. So it was really kind of like AI assisted, right? We think of it as like AI assisted, AI led and autonomous. And then we integrated Gemini into our SIEM. So now analysts, when they're looking at an event, can ask it questions or summarize it, which actually makes it great for me because when an exec comes and asks me, "Hey, like what happened here?" Instead of trying to read through reams of investigation data, I can ask for the summary and it'll just give me the summary and I can post it to them. So that's like that's really the start.
I'm mind blown that you go through a million tickets a year and what less than 1% handled by humans. That checks out. I think I see that. I think even in normal log volumes, when I would look at the math of all the logs that we're getting and how many alerts are generated, it's less than 1% typically, right? But you're saying that's like one more step because you have a million tickets throughout the year. That's pretty insane.
About 7 trillion log lines a day.
The numbers are just mind blowing.
Yeah, I think our last like I did a town hall with my team and I think I'd have to go back and look, but it was like something like over total, it was some quadrillion number of log lines throughout the year that we had processed through our pipelines.
But it's interesting because less than 1% of a million, you know, that's still a lot of work. But you're saying now with agents, I mean, how has that changed? You know?
We're being somewhat conservative here. Right. So we are automating things, but we're automating things where we know the precision can be high. So we spend a lot of time building golden data sets and
Mm.
training on it because we really have a no fail mission. Right. And we have to be very extremely careful that we don't miss something. So if we miss something and then a year down the road figure out, oh wow, the AI was never evaluating this and God forbid we're popped, that's an issue. So we are being, somewhat conservative and careful in how we approach it, but we're being steady, right? Kind of slow and steady wins the race. We've done a lot with it, but it's a lot, like I said, on the assisted side. So we always do have humans in the loop right now. We're currently actually in discussions for our deduplication agent. We'll still have humans in the loop, but not on every ticket. Like we still have humans evaluating, saying, was this really a dupe and wasn't? And it's funny because of course you get now human opinion in there, and one person will say one thing and one person will say another. So we just have to kind of dedupe that as well. But we're getting to that. We've also used it in a lot of other areas. So like I also have our vulnerability coordination team. So new vols that come out looking across, are looking across the enterprise. Are we affected? They've done a fantastic job automating the data collection of, every day what new vols are out there, processing that data, pulling the metadata out from, it's from trusted periodicals because you could end up finding a Reddit post too that's going to say, oh my God, there's a vulnerability, pulling the metadata out and then evaluating across our infrastructure, are we possibly affected? And then writing a report and recommending next actions to the analysts. So it took what was, hours of work into a dashboard that people click on and see new things, right? So it's almost not instantaneous, right? But it is minutes of work versus hours to days.
What success have you had with agents so far? So we've talked a lot about human in the loop, and
Yeah.
I do respect the mindset of going slow and steady, making sure there's no fundamental errors, and then using that with you mentioned golden data sets too. That's just such a hugely important thing to have in LLM systems. So like, how are you thinking about the road to more autonomy in your team?
Yeah. So, what from an agentic standpoint, either the deduplication agent is an agent, we're just keeping humans there. We also have agents running for specific detections that we have that are solely responsible for it. But right now we've still kept humans in the loop and tickets still go for evaluation, even if it's after the fact. So it really it's very, we're building a little bit more generic agents and making them pluggable. So I think we can plug things together and build a detection that we need. So an exfiltration agent that will do an evaluation for exfiltration, malware, etc. But we're breaking it into its component parts and then putting them together in interesting ways like Legos.
And then can you talk a little about the golden data sets that you mentioned? I mean, is that part of this? So you have an exfil agent, and then you have a lot of exfil examples. Is that the idea behind it?
That is correct, right? Or we will generate them, and but the golden data sets are validated by a human. So we are training it based on data that has been validated by a human and is good quality data.
Are these agents fine-tuned or just prompting on Sec-Gemini?
Now they're fine tuned.
Oh, interesting. Wow. And then
I mean, we have some prompting on Sec-Gemini on Gemini because we are using kind of Gemini. Sec-Gemini, we have tested it with Timesketch and a number of other tools, but it is not Sec-Gemini is not running the core of our infrastructure. We're still Gemini.
hmm, I have a friend who who works at Google, and he was talking about how like the mindset is really around like wanting to use Gemini a lot over like fine-tuned models just because it incentivizes Gemini to get better. I thought that was such a like I think that's a really strong mindset in a lot of ways. And it feels scalable just because as the models increase over time, you can just adjust your prompts. So you don't have to spend the money fine-tuning again. So it's
Yeah,
I
and then
think
we
it's
also
good.
have essentially overseer agents that check the quality and can act as a tiebreaker because, again, we're very worried about the quality of what we're seeing and what we are trusting. And it's not to say that the AI is bad. It's just we have to be very careful because we're approaching it conservatively, just given the amount of threats that we see and what the amount of data that we hold and what we're worried about. So I'd rather index on slow and steady and careful than YOLO, let's try it, and a year down the road, we find out we have a major problem.
So how are you auditing the agents? So in the world where you do have a lot of agentic, let's just say like analysis of alerts, like, what's your evaluation process? Like, are you having other agents always go through and look at things in aggregate? Are you having humans go look at like the reasoning and the outcomes? Like,
It's both. So we do have humans looking at the reasoning and the outcome for those tickets, but we have agents looking in aggregate of the outcomes as well.
super interesting. And then what do those agents really look for? Do they look for like inconsistency? Do they look at context gathering? Like, how are you evaluating? Like, how do you evaluate a good run?
That I would have to for the full context there, I would have to check with the AI team because I've left it to them. Right.
It's hard.
Uh, I mean, yeah, it's a hard problem, and it's it's a lot of complicated, especially given AI is somewhat non-deterministic, right?
Very. Yes.
So our leads on AI have built an entire model, or not AI model, but like framework around how we do the evaluation there. So but it's a tough problem, right? Because that's why we still keep humans in the loop.
I'm sure it's a massive advantage having all of those incredible AI minds, just within reach.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
Like we have questions, we can go to the DeepMind team, right? And it gives us very wild ideas on how we can use it because we even look at it for the quality of our tickets and not even done by humans. So in the SOC or so I also have our privacy and trust response team. So when we have possible privacy incidents, they're the ones who work with the engineering teams, or with the regulators, etc. Obviously, how we document is extremely important there. So they wrote an agent that will evaluate the ticket quality based on a set of criteria, and then kick it back to the analyst if it's missing various criteria. But it's pretty in depth, right? Like, did you document the outcome? Did you document this? And is there enough context in this ticket? And it's getting rolled out throughout the rest of the team, but it's different per from a security response versus privacy response versus the general kind of SOC, or we call it threat detection operations team. But evaluating the quality of the work done by even humans.
I do think scalability across the organization is like one of the biggest benefits of agents in a lot of ways. And just like the democratization of a highly technical, highly nuanced workflow.
Yeah.
We see that a lot.
I mean, the scalability, all our problems, right? From a scale standpoint, as we said, like 7 trillion log lines, million, a million events a year, our scale, right? And while I don't ever see AI completely replacing humans. It will, and maybe in some roles it will, but there's enough that's novel and requires a lot of nuanced thinking that I think that is where our SOC and our response people will focus over time, rather than the more generic is as bad as this good. Like, we know this is bad, let's go deeper, right? Whether it's a forensic piece or there's various other regimes that we need to look at from regulatory or otherwise of like there's something here more to evaluate here that the AI might not pick up on. So we need to make sure that we have a human evaluation on it. I
Hmm.
where I see it. Maybe, down the road, like I would love to have, and one of our goals this year is to actually have it start rating detections for us
Autonomously or,
honestly.
oh, wow. I've,
Right? It's early. I will say it's early. But I mean, that is where we want to be, but it's very early. And then I've had discussions with, well, what was TAG and now is the Google Threat Intelligence Group. It's kind of like have your agent people call our agent people, and I want to ingest their threat intel and then have it spit out the right detections based on their threat intel where possible.
yeah, certainly possible.
Early not sci-fi, but early. But that's where we will be in the next probably 2 to 3 years. Is
Mhm.
on our goals, our OKRs, right? We set a stretch OKR of 70% of our operations work will be automated. Some of it's AI, but we said automated because, like I said, we have to do that critical evaluation of, is this AI or is this just we need automation here? All right.
That's a critical distinction, by the way.
Yes. Yes, because we did. Well, when we were very early in this, we allowed everybody to experiment. We just said, "Have at it, try a bunch of stuff. Come to us with your ideas. We'll stamp them, try it." And Ismail Sebe, who's my lead for our suite team, had the idea of like, well, not all of these things necessarily we need to use AI for. We could do some of this in Bash. I'm kidding about the Bash part, but we don't necessarily need AI to do this. Let's focus our AI resources on the things that really are complex for AI. And I think it was a key distinction there of, this we can do and go and with some logic, and this is a perfect use case for artificial intelligence.
How do you break that down a little further, right? It's like, how would you give criteria between what's good with an agent, what's good with traditional automation as it has been for you guys for a long time?
Yeah. I think things that require a fair amount of judgment rather than if A, then B, then C, more AI. Whereas automation, if it's just do these 5 steps every time, it's just automation. But something that requires some set of nuance, some sort of judgment, some sort of data analysis is much more focused on, is much more suitable for AI. But we took it experiment by experiment and really kind of looked deep into it of, you know, should we use AI for this or should we just write this as a script and put it in our pipeline?
I like that framing a lot, especially around judgment, because it kind of goes back to what you were saying around nuance. Like, how do you build like the right data sets in the right context so it can start to do nuanced thinking? The areas that I personally noticed using agents, like, I think it struggles with unknown unknowns in a way, right? So I mean, I think this is like as the models are built, right? Like this is classic prompting. It only will really answer based on what is in your prompt and what is in its reasoning. But it's not very good at thinking about what it hasn't thought about, which I think as humans, that's what we're good at, right? We're like, well, on paper, this looks really terrible. But if I just go ask the person if they did it, like, hey, did you just travel to this place for the first time and log into the VPN? Yes. Oh, okay. It's fine then. It's benign. It's like, but the model sees it and it's like, oh my God, I have all this evidence that shows that it's risky. We need to, wipe the machine or something. It's like, no, no, no. Like we have to consider all these other options that aren't obvious. And yeah, the models aren't there yet. But I guess the question is how? How do we get it there,
Yeah, and that's the nuance I was saying way earlier was that that's what it, even like I said, regulatory regimes. Maybe this detection, if it fires, needs an exec notification because I'll just say DORA. DORA requires it, right? It can learn that, but in some cases, humans are much better suited to know these specific things, or it's just better in the ticket and then it can read it. So it's probably not the best example, but understanding that nuance and that same thing of like, no, they VPN, it's okay, versus kind of overinflating it, saying, no, this is terrible. You know, they VPN'd from Colorado and there's no way, right? Because we have a impossible travel signal, right? And it's always one of these things like, where is the person? And then sometimes it's like a physics problem of like, what happens if they go from one building to the other, right? Just we've had it fire in very weird scenarios of like, they were just across campus. Why did you fire? Why did you fire? But
That's a challenge though, because as humans, we even challenge the data, right? Like we'll look at like IP geolocation and we'll be like, no, that's not where they actually are. Like I know that person lives in this city
yeah.
and the geolocation data is just wrong, you know?
I mean, that's the next piece too from an AI is we're for 2026 is looking at multi-step investigations, right?
What do you
So
mean?
deeper into forensics, right? Let's just say dual employment or a number, things that require a lot of very in-depth work and forensic analysis, right? Rather than good, bad, let's do some deeper things, or we can automate this away of, even in some cases, manual requests, right? People will come in and say, we need to do forensics here. So it's, investigations that are much deeper and broader, and how does it handle them, and how can we essentially identify them, but how can we use AI to make that faster? Because those are the ones, it might be 5 tickets a year, but it could take a week or 2 weeks or 5 weeks of investigation, right? And that's what Martin and our response team were working on with Timesketch in some cases, right? How do we use AI, integrate AI? And they were using Sec-Gemini. They did a big test with the Sec-Gemini team into Timesketch to help kind of ease that load, right? And I think, if I remember right, they invented an entirely new chunking method to do it. So there's probably a patent. I think they're up for a patent for it. But that's, Timesketch is one of our main forensics tools that we use for timelining. And, it's hours and days of pointing and clicking and saying, this might be good, this might be good, this might be bad, this might be good, this is fine, let's get rid of this stuff. Now, AI has done summaries there and sped it up by, 50x in some cases. And still honestly a test, and it's still where we're pursuing, but they're moving further down that path on these much more complicated, nuanced investigations and being able to ask it questions.
And I think Gemini specifically is kind of at an advantage here when it comes to things like timelines that are just very long, right? Because my personal perception of Gemini is it's just amazing at large context windows, and we just have a lot of data in cyber. So it feels like a really nice match, especially for timelining, which could be crazy verbose.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of where we win and what we rely on a lot for our analysis. But I mean, it's still, I kind of still look at it, we're still at the very, very beginning. These are still extremely early days of this tech. It's really, the best time to be in.
100%.
But seeing how much progress we've only made in 2 or 3 years is pretty amazing. We went from, like, let's try some stuff. Let's just try a few things. Let's, like, write summaries and do this, to now we're deduping tickets. We're having it evaluate humans' work on the tickets. We're having it do an entire vulnerability workflow, and then telling the people working on it what they should probably think of. And on top of that, now we've built, our vulnerability team has identified it to the point where we can ask, is the Google infrastructure affected? Like, not what do you think, or like, let's look at, were we, but is it affected based on all of the data we have about machines and a number of other things. One thing I am very, very, very thankful for in our environment is that we have we have very different services. It's very well cataloged and very well managed. So we have information about every machine. We have our agents on every machine. We don't have, sure, there's always some shadow IT around. I don't think we're ever going to get away from it, but I would say, 80 to 90% of our infrastructure is well cataloged because of Beyond Corp, which is our zero trust architecture that we built after Aurora. Right? But that helps us really normalize the data, and then then we can feed it into AI, and we actually get, relatively good output.
I want to go a little bit back to what we were talking about with detections getting created and kind of that thought process. And what's the mindset shift right now when you think about AI creating detections and AI responding to alerts? I assume we don't need to write the same style of detection that we were doing previously. Like, tell us a little bit about that mindset. How are you thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we will need to, and I also think that, over time, it really becomes less about the detection and more about the inference. We really want to move to a model. Oh, and this isn't just the detection and response team. This is, the security team at Google, really moving to an infer and interrupt model, right? So what you're doing is suspect or sus, right? Like, why did you download these files? Why did you do this? Or you IDV'd and your credentials were wrong, right? Instead of, spinning up an entire response and doing everything, it will automatically take and mitigate or contain you. Now, the actions can be minor, like, hey, we're going to cut off your email for an hour. That's not necessarily one, but I'll just give it as an example. Or up to and including, we're going to lock your account. So I think as we write these detections, we're keeping that in mind. Or as we think about, AI writing these detections and shifting it left, we're really keeping in mind, can we get earlier in the process? Because AI attackers don't sleep, they don't eat, they're going to move faster, so we need to move faster. So we'll always have a need for I think we'll always have a need for traditional detection and response, but I feel like it should decrease over time if we can shift it further left and faster. I think that's the only way we can we can defend ourselves in the future.
So do you think that the style of detection becomes more broad? Because it seems like the way I interpret infer and interrupt is let's look for a signal of something that could be bad. Let's change the environment slightly and see how it responds.
I
Like,
would say yes. I would say, I mean, I think it's a split, but I would say yes, the style of detection becomes more broad and it might become a little bit more generic. Like this looks odd, right? And there will always be detectors that are like, no, this is bad, right? Like, you know, malware, bad, right? But I think it does become, let's say, 70% broader of these are, this is odd, this is different, this is, you know, kind of out of band for what should be happening. Let's do a check. Whether it's a challenge, right? We can just challenge and say, is this really you doing this? Right? Touch your security key. Because as you know, we're like all everybody Google has to have a security key, right? There's no, you don't really have access if you don't have a security key. Or we really feel this is bad. We're gonna lock your account until we know what's going on. So I do, I feel it does become broader, but that doesn't mean we don't still need specific detections for specific things. But I think they might end up more based on intel that we get in various TTPs and maybe shorter lived. Or there are things that we need to worry about right now. Because one of the bigger problems that I see is how do we pivot quickly when we get new intel? Right? Like today it's this threat, tomorrow it's this threat, tomorrow it's the other threat. Can we get detections fast enough to meet that threat where it is? So it's probably more like a generic layer or a broad layer, and then a much more specific layer where applicable.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, a lot of the detections that we would write, like if you just look at the minor matrix, right? So many of those tactics and techniques
Yeah,
just need so much context to actually judge. So it's super hard to write a detection that's reliable for honestly most of it.
yeah,
And in the scaling of human judgment, like I feel like that's the unlock. Like the fact that we can be more generic, we can have agents that can do some fairly decent reasoning if they have the right context. But then the more important piece is the tools in the environment, like you're saying, lock the account for an hour, touch the security key. Like with the combination of all of this, I mean, you're pretty much at autonomy at that point, right? And the only limitations end up being, do you have the right tools to interact with the environment to get the context? And then do you have enough like capital to do this on everything, you know?
yeah. Well, that's the trick, right? We are living in a much more constrained environment these days. You know, lots of resources are going towards AI, and not our AI, just AI in general. So what we are also having the discussion with all our analysts and engineers is how do we do this more efficiently, right? Because, you know, years past, it could be just like, I wrote something, it works, cool. We tested it, it works, put it in production. But now is like, is it the most efficient way to do this? And is it introducing delays in our pipeline that takes us from we knew about this in 15 minutes to it took 5 hours or 24 hours because we made a copy and that copy only gets copied and then it only gets evaluated tomorrow. So it is, we're in some ways rethinking our architecture of how we do that and how our engineering behaviors are in even how we write detections. And I think, we will add AI on top of that as we go. But it's a tough challenge. It's a tough challenge right now because we have so much data and we're processing so much that we still, we run up against scaling problems all the time.
That's honestly believable based on what you had said at the beginning around like 7 trillion events and, a million tickets and things like that. So
We really need to get faster, right? Speed, if I had to pick one thing, if I had to, because I think, speed and cost and context, almost think of them as the old like project management triangle of, time, cost, and quality. Like everything shifts around. You're never getting away from all of it, but you over-index on one and the others change. But I think speed is where, is one thing that we have to index on here, and especially in this era. And human written detections long term are just not going to be fast enough or thorough enough.
So what are you measuring at the end of the day here, right? Like in this AI model, you're probably not looking at the typical metrics because humans aren't responding anymore to everything. So like how do you measure success here?
It's a good question. I mean, I think at this point it's so basic. It's what are we catching? What are we catching? How fast? I mean, we can do an evaluation against humans for this event. How fast would we catch it? Would a human catch it versus how fast? Would it sit in the queue? Would it not? And then I would look at it as from a time to mitigation. So from the point it happened to the point we mitigated the threat, how long? And that's even something we look at now, right? We look at time to first touch, time to mitigation. And the first touch piece, another good one, probably going to be it's going to be much faster with AI just in general because AI can move a lot faster than, two humans working ops in a queue, right? But how fast did, from the point the attack or whatever happened to the point where we stopped it and mitigated it, what's the delta?
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
we're going to have to invent, we're in the middle of it. We're having to invent new metrics here because of the speed. And also, it's a quality problem. Like, what's the recall? What's the precision? Right? For example, for duplication agent, we're at about 95% precision and about 38% recall. But we have to trade off because if we up the precision, the recall goes down. Right? So it is a trade off on how far it swings one way, it swings the other in an opposite direction.
so. How are you thinking about the next 2 years? I think you gave a little preview of it before, but what's the next phase of this?
The march to autonomous. The next phase of this is the march to autonomous. And I'm in specific sectors, but I think when I look at our threat detection operations team, which would, classically be defined as a SOC, what are we going to automate away for them so they can focus on the things that we can't at this point, right? They're not, my overall team's 300 people. Our threat detection operations team is about 30, right? We have 100 detection engineers writing detections, working on the more detection engineering side. How can we focus them on the most, novel and complex things while everything else either gets automated or AI'd away, right? All of the routine things, the things we're seeing multiple times, or things that we need to deal with but don't require deeper investigation, don't require human judgment. And that's just on the detection side. On the privacy response side, it's similar. We have it asking follow-up questions to people when they file privacy reports. And on the vulnerability side, it's somewhat similar of like, how do we automate away a fair amount of the work they have to do to just collect data about the infrastructure. And it just tells them, yes, these hosts are affected. Go tell them to patch their stuff. So it really is the march to autonomous across the entire team. That is the goal, right? But I think it's not just, we lit up one agent and we're autonomous. I think this is, it is a very, very much an iterative process, and we're going to learn a lot. We're already learning a lot and have been learning a lot, and we're going to learn a lot more along the way.
What's been probably the most prominent learning in this process of implementing agents and making progress to autonomy?
Our biggest learning here has been, how deep the rabbit hole really goes and in what AI is capable of. Right? Early on, a lot of naysayers were like, oh, it hallucinates all the time. Right? It's not going to be able to do this. And what we're seeing is really good quality when you curate it properly. Right? And what it pulls out. Right? When we did the test with Timesketch and Sec-Gemini, the events we were able to pull out from generic logs, no human would have ever seen if they didn't know exactly what they were looking for, right? So how deep that goes and the amount of extra we can see and the amount more we can see just by introducing AI and, and really introducing Gemini into the equation.
Yeah, I believe it. I mean, even in just spotting patterns, because there are so many patterns in a timeline, in logs, it's just impossible for a human to see it all.
That's the time sketch problem right there is you import everything and then you're starting to look at the timeline and it might be 5 people looking at it because it's a collaborative tool, but it's still, you're looking at a bunch of colored boxes and a bunch of logs that are not necessarily, they're human readable, but loosely human readable. And you're scrolling down going, this might be bad. This might be bad. I mean, of course, they're much more thorough than like, this just looks bad. But even then, the AI can make quick work of that and then provide a substantive output to the forensics engineer or the analyst looking at it.
An exciting world.
Really is. It really is. This is like I said, it's still early days, but it is probably the most exciting time to be in the industry.
100%. And with that, I want to ask the final question around you giving us 3 pieces of advice for other leaders sort of navigating the AI evolution in the SOC?
And this is gonna be even more generic because I thought long and hard about this because I listened to a couple of your podcasts. I was like, what are the things I would just the three things? I think number one, critical thinking is key, right? You can have all the tools in the world. You can have, the best infrastructure, but human critical thinking is still key to our jobs. I preach this to the team all the time, especially our response team. Ask questions, think deeper about what you're seeing in front, what's in front of you, right? It's very easy to get playbook blind, and this is something. If I got to think about how we teach this to AI, but it's very easy to get playbook blind and say I did these 5 steps, we're done, right? But think around the problem, like think critically about what you're seeing, and ask more questions if something doesn't feel right. Number two, sometimes you just need a list. This goes back to the should we automate or should we use AI? One of my first lessons when I joined the security team, Heather Adkins taught me,
Hmm.
right? She needed a list of something and she's like, I don't want it indexed. I don't want it fancy. I just need a list. And people struggled with that because they wanted to group it by category and do this. It's like, no, sometimes you just need a list. Probably all horses, not zebras problem, but so, understand when you just need something very basic and don't overcomplicate it, and understand when you need something either more complicated or more in depth. And then number three, I think, as a leader, it's extremely important that we take care of each other, that we take care of our teams, and we take care of ourselves. All right. On my team, one thing I can't abide is a team member who will not help others on the team or others within the company, or even in the industry. Right. That is, I think, especially these days, but, in general, just as humans, it's the most important thing we can do.
I'm very inspired. I'm gonna go fire up 6 Claude codes and
Wait, Claude? Wait a minute.
sorry, Gemini CLIs. I'm gonna fire up 10 Gemini CLIs, and I'm gonna make our agents take all the learnings for this conversation into our agents. So we're being reliable and evaluating and doing all the strong lessons that you imparted here today. This is super interesting. Was really excited to hear their perspective here, and really looking forward to this episode coming out.
All right, me too. Thank you very much for having me on, Jack.
Thanks, Michael. Catch y'all next time.